Director Dewey, I noticed on the agenda there was no meeting notes approval. Are we bypassing that step today?
For the
For today's agenda? Yes.
yeah, those are not ready.
Okay.
We'll put this on for the 6th.
Okay. So we're moving that to the 6th. And that takes us to the matters of discussion. And we'll turn to you, Director Dooley, to walk us through the considerations for the development of an APFO.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks. Tonight's staff is going to basically summarize the staff report and is here to try to answer questions the best I can, as well as to receive your feedback for consideration. Before I start, I will let you know that as I believe Council Gutenberg is aware, that the town manager and staff will be presenting a APFO or a summary of our capacity issues probably sometime late August, early September. So there'll be a further discussion as it related to the APFO issue at hand. So I just wanted to let you all know that before I forget.
And just to clarify, when you say presenting, do you mean to the council?
Council, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And just for understanding, which capacities are being focused on there, if you know?
Primarily water.
Okay.
is what we're concerned with, and then any sewer issues, obviously, because you really have to have one with the other.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay, so to begin, as the commission is aware, Chair Banks and Council Liaison Gutenberg had requested Planning Commission study session to discuss the development of an adequate public facilities ordinance for the town of La Plata. At present, building permits for water taps are not being issued by the town for new development until La Plata can acquire additional water capacity to accommodate its recently approved development, primarily within the last 2 or 3 years. Although the town has been in discussions with the Maryland Department of the Environment for over a decade to increase the town's appropriation permit for water, MDE has been unwilling to approve any pending withdrawal increases and has opted for a regional water management approach to encourage conservation rather than allocations to the town. The town has also attempted to acquire or negotiate with the Charles County government Board of Supervisors for water allocations. However, the county at this point has been reluctant to assist La Plata with its water needs without the town having its own APFO in place. However, more recently, the county supervisor, or excuse me, the county administrator has directed their staff to begin working with town staff, myself, to provide some feedback in terms of what the county believes would be appropriate to be incorporated within the APO development for the town of La Plata. They have not reached out at this point. Staff is at capacity ourselves, so we've not initiated that, but that communication is about a week old. So I'm anticipating hearing from the county shortly. But apart from ensuring the adequate school seating capacity is achieved with residential development, the town of La Plata really does not have any other APFO ordinance. It's just simply school seating. There are other types of capacity issues that other communities throughout Maryland typically address, including transportation or roads, as well as water and sewer, but it will also include drainage, fire, EMS capacity for police, solid waste disposal, healthcare, and even parks and recreation. At present, most communities in Maryland, though, do not address all of the development capacity issues out there, but the ones that I just mentioned are the typical ones that are found, with water and sewer and transportation probably being the most common. So considerations for developing an APFO. APFO can be extremely valuable planning tool when applied in conjunction with other planning tools and in context with broader comprehensive plan growth management strategies as part of the community's comprehensive plan. A coherent APFO in combination with growth management policies can help provide clear guidance to developers on when and where development will be allowed, avoiding unexpected delays. However, an APFO must be accompanied by a facilities capacity plan with a commitment to provide the facilities to support growth in a reasonable manner. The facilities included in a local APFO should also reflect community needs and focus on facilities over which the jurisdiction has control. One of those that we don't necessarily have complete control is our roads. We do have streets such as Washington that belong to the county, or Crane that belongs to the state. So this creates some coordination challenges for developing our own APFO. One of the most important steps in establishing an APFO concerns the minimum standards to be adopted for infrastructure or service capacity types. These are like, for example, for roads, what intersections, what is our level of service? What should it be? What is the town willing to accept and not accept? This determination will be the genesis of identifying how permissive or restrictive an APFO for the town should be written. Most decisions will then be based on expectations within the community regarding overall quality of life goals that are often memorialized within our comprehensive plan document and other public policy documents. There are two steps involved for determining an APFO standard. The first is, what technical standard does the town want to use to measure capacity for public facilities and services? The second being is to determine how the performance of local service and infrastructure capacity types are to be measured against adopted standards. And depending on the type of public facility we're talking about, there are different standards that are out there. But as part of this larger discussion, we'll eventually have to address and come to agreement on the types of standards that we want to use and how the standards will be applied so that we get consistent results. When you plug in a number, you get a number out, and that it can be done consistently over and over again, so you don't have variances in terms of the numbers that you generate through the formulas that are being used to determine capacity. So understanding a community's The other important thing to know is that understanding a community's theoretical maximum or cumulative build-out potential is really important. This includes identifying the maximum residential density throughout the town based on its comprehensive plan and the zoning allocations for example, for all of our residential development within the town. Simply looking at the zoning code, you're not going to necessarily understand the total allowable density that could potentially be developed. And we're talking about not only undeveloped space, but you're looking at properties that may be underutilized, where there might be one house on a property that's 5 acres that might generate more residential development if that property was demolished and reconstructed. So we have to look at these types of things. We also need to evaluate the amount of square footage for non-residential developments, properties out there, and the zoning allocations for them. So looking at the total number of housing units, the total square footage that could be built in the community for non-residential purposes becomes the basis of understanding what our capacity needs really are if they were maximized to the greatest extent possible. But knowing this is important to ensure that development does not exceed or grossly outpace the service capacity limits of the community to support its growth based on what the the town has approved in its comp plan. APFOs can be developed also as a singular ordinance to address multiple development capacity issues, or it can also be developed as a single ordinance. So you address capacity issues based on immediate needs. For example, I would argue that water and sewer capacity is our first and foremost issue to the town. So we might look at developing an APFO just focused on that particular issue, rather than trying to eat the entire elephant at one go, which is going to take more time and more effort. These types of APFO studies that we'll have to do are going to be heavily time consuming. They are going to take a lot of staff time and resources. Consultant will most probably and likely be required to do this, because this goes way beyond staff's capacity to be able to address the issues that are involved, even just with water and sewer alone. But out of these studies, we would hope to understand what our actual capacity needs are for the entire town, how we would manage development so that infrastructure does not get behind new development as it comes before us. So we're always prepared, or at least commensurate with development. And because right now our development is getting out ahead of our ability, as we all know, to be able to support that development in town.
Director Dooley, can I stop you there?
Yes, ma'am.
So you talked about conducting studies, and we talked a couple of weeks ago about existing data. The town has, I'm assuming, in whatever state, existing data around whether it's GIS data or demographic data or land use data. How do we capture the data we have, understanding that it's not perfect and it's probably not complete, and start to build on that data? We don't want to reinvent the wheel necessarily. We don't want to start from scratch, and I can't imagine we would have to start from scratch. Is there any consideration in terms of, first of all, looking at existing data, how that data can be used? And that may be a conversation with the contractor, I don't know. But can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's a great point, and what I can tell you is there's not been any comprehensive discovery of the data. And the other challenge is that most of your senior staff are new, and this information is not on the tip of our brain to know where to go for this information. So it's going to require research to look at different capacity the information that we have to address particular capacity issues. I can tell you that for planning, we do have some information that could be useful to at least to start the groundwork. But I suspect that Public Works will also have information there, but it's a very time consuming. I expect it'll be a time consuming effort that we'll have to go through and discover what's on the computer files, because a lot of stuff has now been put on electronic format, and the paper copies of things are just not around to find. So, but yes, that's would be the first step in understanding what our existing capacity issues are. The other part is simply we'll have to go out and survey what's there to know what we have. So it's going to be a combination of things.
Thank you, that's helpful. I may be jumping ahead here, but you mentioned timing. I don't know if you'll talk about that at the end of the presentation, so I'm interested in the timing and the resources that you anticipate would be needed.
Well,
and just to clarify, this APFO will be a dynamic document, so it's not stagnant. So we can build on it as we develop more information or things change, correct?
100%, yes.
Okay.
Yes. I didn't really have much more to go on the presentation, but I would, other than to just reemphasize that additional research and study is going to be necessary for this. In terms of timing, it clearly has to be a priority for the town. I think we all recognize that. Without water sewer capacity on there, the development out there is just not going to happen. And the repercussions of having half-built developments is not desirable for anybody. Um, as far as the cost, this is something that we will have to, that based on future council decisions and direction, we'll have to go out and once we understand what the council wants from this capacity analysis and what issues that we want to address, then we'll be able to go out and look for an RFP to get some help to start to address some of the basic issues and begin developing and studying our APFO issue. Staff will clearly be involved in helping the consultant to gather this type of information, but the timing on this, in short, is imperative. We need to do it now, and we're going to have to be patient. And I hope the development community and the residents are patient. We are trying to resolve this issue, but it's not simply, believe me, it's simply not just writing down an ordinance and going here. There is a lot more involved with this, and it's going to be time consuming. It's going to cost money to do it.
Yeah. So if I could, I'd like to sort of frame a little bit of my view on this. I really appreciate the amount of detail and the way staff presented this. This is a really good way to introduce residents and us, all who are looking into this, as a new feature of how we would manage the impacts of growth here in La Plata, right?
Mhm.
And so going through this, a thing that stands out to me, and I think we should talk about it amongst ourselves here tonight, is that you introduced a lot of different categories that can be used or that can be addressed in an APFO, and during the most recent election cycle, this was a big topic of conversation with people that we met out and about, and those conversations touched a broad set of the things that are discussed in here, from everything from the amount of police officers we have to the roads, certainly the traffic, the schools came up a lot, and the water infrastructure, right? But I think it's really important, and I think what you're asking for in this staff report is really some acknowledgement of the amount of resources it's going to take to try and address all of those, and that we have to be realistic and prioritize what we decide to help focus town staff on through our interactions here with this commission, and what we think that the council is going to be receptive to as well in providing resources for, right? And so one of the things I'd like to say about that is that the as you stated, Director Dooley, the water infrastructure is the water delivery infrastructure of drinking water is, I think, the top priority from a standpoint of the capacities that are at our doorstep, affecting property owners and affecting people who are paying taxes and paying bills on the infrastructure that provides that service. So I agree with what you said, that the water delivery infrastructure and the sewer, which are really kind of tied together, you really cannot pull those apart. I understand that, and I agree. So I think that is an important distinction we should make here, probably, is that should be a priority, and we should discuss that tonight if there needs to be more discussion on it. But I also wanted to say, with there's a couple things I wanted to point out on other capacity areas that would be potentially in an APFO. Schools is an interesting one. The town of La Plata does not fund schools. However, the town of La Plata, when we when we approve development, certainly impacts schools, right? Certainly.
Mhm.
And I think we all acknowledge that. And the county school board has a process by which the town interfaces with them on a standard by which they capture metrics on the size of households, and that there are assumed number of students based on the household sizes and the developments, and we provide those to the county, and then they scale budgets and impacts based on that. Is there any more that you could maybe add on that just to help?
I think you probably
Okay.
stated most of what I already know. I probably can't answer,
Okay.
make any further comments on it. But yeah, that's fundamentally how it does work. Um, school allocations. I will say this. Let me add this related to schools. The way that in my research, the way, and I think I addressed it in the staff report a lot, the way that school capacity is determined is sort of after a plat map or a recorded, or after a plat map is approved, sort of recorded. Um, a lot of communities in the state the look at capacity analyses as needing to be done before we even engage in having a discussion about new development to determine what the environmental, if you will, the environmental impact is on school capacity, on water and transportation, whatever is in our APFO, sort of a look before you leap into approving more stuff that at this point the town can't authorize to be for building permits because we don't have, in this case, water and sewer. I think that it becomes really critical that when we develop an APFO, that we sort of change our thinking and look at these impacts before we know whether or not we want to proceed forward with approving a preliminary plat, for example. I would also proffer that even now, when we're approving preliminary plats and major site plans, the applicants or developers understand that they're not going to get their plat recorded or building permits. The town may want to do a second look at that policy and say, hey, we don't necessarily want to provide any sort of vesting rights to a project until we solve this problem, because the more that we approve, the deeper we dig ourselves into a hole with regard to capacity. And I do worry about the potential liability that the town has to approve projects that we can't issue permits for.
And that last comment is related to all capacities, not just schools, I think is what, okay.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So, all right, so that to not lose the thread on what you just said, I mean, I think probably that would be part of a future recommendation that you would, yeah, okay. And also just to put a bow on the schools component of this, when in thinking about schools, even if the town were to say, well, we would like to do a different standard, because this is something I actually heard people talk about during the lead up to the election, right? It was like, well, we should have a tighter standard on how many houses are built versus the school to house ratio, right? And the issue with that would be, first of all, the county sets that, the county school board sets that ratio, and it applies across the entire county. The other issue with that, as I see it, would be that the county's school districts don't neatly fit within the borders of the town of La Plata, further complicating that kind
Yes.
of thing. Yeah, so
There's misalignment
correct.
of that. Yeah, so the question becomes, is there really capacity for La Plata
That could be different.
or that could be different from than the county, depending on how the school district boundary lines are drawn.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and it's for a reason like that, that for those reasons that we just discussed, that's why I would recommend that we don't pursue a school specific APO for the town of La Plata, that the issues that are surrounding that are better solved by engagement with the county and the county school board specifically, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Now, the ordinance that we have effectively is an APFO for schools because we are evaluating school capacity. So that's been memorialized in our ordinances.
Okay, we just don't call it an APFO, but we have a
don't-
standard that we do.
We have a standard and we do evaluate for that before we issue permits because there's an impact on from development for schools. So even though we're not calling an APFO, fundamentally we already have one for schools.
Right. Okay. And then another category maybe to address. So, setting aside the water infrastructure for a minute, which is, from our perspective, is neatly within the bounds of the town's ability to pay and the ability to manage that infrastructure, in that it is the town's infrastructure. So it is completely in our purview to do that. With roads, as you pointed out, we have a network of state, county, and local streets and throughways, things like that. So that is inherently complex, I would think, as well, from an APFO standard. While it can be done, it requires a considerable amount of negotiations. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm listening to what you're saying.
Okay.
I agree that we've got a patchwork of roads and identifying what would be an acceptable standard and acceptable level of service, for example, for our roads. In some degree is out of our hands if it's involves intersections that we have no control over, but clearly impact the town. And you're absolutely correct. It's going to require working closely with the state and county to come to some sort of a consensus in terms of how we want to address our standards, and what mitigation measures that we might use that would be acceptable if we have new development in the town that pushes levels of service beyond what the town would prefer, but the state or the county may accept.
Okay.
So you're right. It is an extremely challenging topic, but it's in my perspective, it's number 2 right after the water and sewer.
Right. And so the limitation on us, though, right now is I think about the staff resources in the planning department. I believe virtually the entire planning department is here tonight.
Yes.
Virtually. I mean, there's a little more help that you have, but to do this level of work, right? We're looking at what we have as a resource, and so we're also, as you pointed out, going to have to do things with consultants on this as well. So with traffic, though, short of an APFO, are there recommendations that you could make to this commission on things that we can do to achieve similar kinds of results, or to at least move ourselves into an area where we are positively impacting these effects on traffic?
Well, it's sort of all wrapped up into a standard of what it is the town wants. I would tell you that in other communities that I've worked for, oftentimes these standards are already wrapped up within your comprehensive plan. For example, comprehensive plan may say for different intersections, the capacity for the level of service shall not go over a level of service C or maybe D.
Mhm.
You certainly don't want to go into F because that's just chronic breakdown of the street intersection. The challenge is that we can do traffic study and we can look at the potential impacts of new development. The challenge becomes, if the level of service goes from D to F, it comes to the planning commission or the staff. What do you do with that? Can you really enforce mitigation measures to improve the streets or change signaling, analysis capacity? What can you do if the development, for example, at Charles and Crane Street, we have Charles Street on that side, we have on the south side, state controls that north-south direction. You're not necessarily solving the problem if you don't have a a maximum limitation that our partners at the state or the county agree to,
Right.
where we could say that, hey, this development needs to be mitigated or denied if it exceeds this level of service, or it requires transportation improvements to enable the level of service for that intersection to meet a certain standard.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does, and it brings up an interesting topic that I wanted to pull the thread on a little bit with you, educate me on this. So the Planning Commission receives most of its authority, as I have come to understand it, from the Maryland land use article.
Mhm.
And as I've come to understand it, that gives the Planning Commission in the town of La Plata, I think, like three really primary functions around supporting and driving the update to the comprehensive plan, developing tools which can be all the way up to ordinances and recommendations for ordinances. I shouldn't say ordinances, recommendations for ordinances to the town council, but other tools short of going to an ordinance as well to help enforce isn't the right word, to help comply with the intent of the comprehensive plan, which is not an ordinance, but it is a document that is coordinated with the county, with Charles County government. It is also coordinated with the state.
Policy statement.
Yeah, policy statement, yes. And so does the Planning Commission have the ability to judge the decisions it makes on, say we ask for a traffic study or something triggers a traffic study on the exact kind of intersection you're talking about, and the capacities goes from the rating, the level of service on an intersection goes from a D to an F in your scenario. Can the Planning Commission legally use the policy document to then enforce that standard and say, we're not willing to allow in a development that takes us to an F at that intersection? Or are we compelled, because there's no ordinance, to approve it?
And could you caveat that by saying you're not a lawyer?
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
She just answered she just made my first sentence statement. Correct. I am not an attorney and I don't pretend to be one. I will tell you that in other states that I've worked in, that I've had other city attorneys basically indicate to me that policies are good if they're written down because they don't they get you away from arbitrariness in decisions. So if you have something written down, it's as at least a policy, it's better than not having anything written down at all. An ordinance is preferable because that's codified. It's been reviewed and approved, and everybody's on the same page. Where you get in trouble is when you don't have a policy that you use over and over again that's written down. And I suspect that if the town ever had any legal woes about that, judge is going to have to make a determination on whether or not that verbal policy is sufficient or not. I would, as the planning director, I would want to at least have it written down and then move toward codification, so that the policies are at least written down in the interim until they can be codified. I think that's probably your best bet. When we look at projects and how we approve them, we're always looking at does the development somehow broadly speaking, adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the community? Is it consistent with the comp plan, consistent with our zoning code? The zoning code implements the policies of the comprehensive plan. If we find things that if we can make a nexus that a project is causing impacts somehow to health, safety, and welfare, then I think you can, based on my experiences in other states, but I want to have a Maryland attorney concur with this.
Sure.
That you can make that finding that this project is causing adverse impacts that either can be mitigated with conditions or it just cannot be mitigated unless the project change.
Okay. So that makes a lot of sense what you said. And I think what I hear reading between the lines really is like we would be putting ourselves at risk potentially because it is probably difficult to have consistent precedents established with application of a policy that allows it to survive challenges.
I think that, again, that's probably for an attorney
Sure.
to answer that
Okay.
question. Um, I do feel though that even if you don't specifically have an ordinance, I think if you can document and demonstrate that there's a nexus between how a project adversely impacts the health, safety, and welfare of the community, just under the town's broad police powers, that it can be denied.
Okay. Yeah, and so I'm just trying to think through like, and you have a lot more experience with this than me, like the practical application of that. Chairman Banks, yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I agree with that. Not that I have more experience, but I agree with your point. And just to, again, pull a thread from what you said, I think policies tag on to statutory or regulatory language. So putting the policy ahead of something codified is probably not going to stand on firm ground.
Policies are usually implemented when you don't have anything codified in your ordinance or in a state law, or it's an interpretation
Yeah,
of a vague
yeah, it's,
ordinance.
yes, okay. So there has to be something to tag it to, yeah, whether it's, yeah. You,
Yeah, I think just to put a bow on that, I think that makes a good case for why we need to do an ordinance in some of these cases. Yeah.
Commissioner Miller, anything?
I mean, boy, do I have questions. But I mean, initially we talked about how, an APFO, that it's siloed or segmented on just water and sewer, potentially could be faster or cheaper. But it sounds like, based on the discussion, a comprehensive, because everything is so interrelated and they're so complicated that it's kind of, we can't lob onto that easy target. We kind of have to do the steps that it takes. And I mean, kind of my next question would be like, what's the overall risk? It kind of sounds like we need to do a study to determine the risk, get all the data. This is the economic input. This is the annual loss of economic activity over a year. But we need to develop a backing and fully understand the risk in order to get back in and do the study. Is that kind of the understanding, or do we have the support currently?
Well, in part, you want to do the study for no other reason to not only to understand what it is that you have, you want to be able to have a basis for developing your APFO, to understand what standards that you need based on what's already existing. And then roll that into what has already been approved through the comprehensive plan in terms of maximum build out. You always want to build it as much as possible. You want to build on information that's documented or studied, particularly for something like this, to know whether or not you're going down a path that makes sense and is consistent with the information as we know it. A study that's current is obviously going to be more helpful than using documents, although you may start with that are old and arguably outdated.
What kind of data do we currently have that you're able to share, if any, regarding, if we got, 100,000, gallons per day production, that would increase that's translates to, $2 million in tax.
Well, that unfortunately, I have no idea to be able to give you an answer. I will tell you that it's my understanding that the for residential development, for example, there's a allocation assumption of 250 gallons of water for each residential unit per day. That includes for sewer as well. But that's about the only number I can I can hold out and proffer at this point in terms of your question.
Okay. New to seat, so it seems like for COA 1 is to try to get support from the state, but they seem to be unwilling to kind of provide for a number of reasons. Is that avenue seem a little bit of exhausted, or is there feasibility, or does it feasible to be optimistic about future conversations with
Well,
them?
it's a great question because the town manager actually was going to be meeting with MDE either this week or next week, if he hasn't already done so, to make our case.
Mhm.
Based on the comprehensive plan in 2020, it was already documented, and which I borrowed from here for this, for the staff report. The counties, excuse me, the state's policy basically was that you need to use your resources more wisely, and make better land use decisions, I guess, to minimize water, so that you're not coming hat in hand looking for more water allocations.
Right.
The irony is that, as I understand it, we have loads of water under the ground,
Right.
but the state has control of that water, and we're beholden to the state for allocations. And so therefore we can't drill more wells or extract more water. We have a water allocation under our existing permit for 1.14 million gallons of water per day on average on a daily basis, and 1.71 million gallons per day in a monthly, excuse me, on 1.7 million gallons per day in the month of maximum use. So the water's out there. We could get more, but we need either the MDW and
MDEP.
sorry, brains going, or the county or somebody to either to help us, or we need to change our strategy in terms of how we deal with water capacity in the town.
Sure.
But we are actively pursuing it. Town manager, I know, is working on this issue just about every day.
Okay.
So just to clarify, you said, and you seem to imply, Commissioner Miller, that MDEP is the problem. Actually, they've said to work regionally, correct?
Yes,
So
as I understand it.
So they're not necessarily the holdup. There are other, I'm assuming Prince George's County and some other nearby counties and municipalities we can work with?
I don't know the answer to that. I suspect we probably could. Charles County becomes the most obvious because that we're in Charles County, so it makes sense that we would go to our own county for resource allocation requests. But maybe we could. I don't see why we couldn't, but the other counties may be more reluctant to even engage with us.
If I could, just because you brought it up and related to this, you talked about strategy and how the town is negotiating, right? And so that I know that the thing I can bring to this group is that the town council and the town manager have worked together on the strategies, and so that is kind of going on. The way I see it is that kind of happens outside of our like that of this commission's realm. However, the strategy piece of it, let me pull this thread a little bit. When we talk about earlier about the need for consultants and things like that, and I'm sort of limiting this to the scope of water and sewer right now. The town has state permits for both daily draws of water and for the processing capacity at the sewage treatment plant. Because those are daily permits, I assume, and this is my question, that the town has daily data on our capacities that we pull out of the ground and that we flush out to the sewage treatment plant. Is that
I think that's a fair question. It seemed like to me that we should. That's probably a question for Public Works.
Right.
And I don't have that answer.
So
But they should have, I would think they would have that kind of data.
I would think so too. And I think that's the foundational element that we would have to give to a consultant or a contractor that would begin to build the equations that we would have to use. And I guess what I'm going to ask though as well is, in its simplest form, does town staff have the ability to take those numbers, right? And then we have the water metering numbers. And so we know how much water is used by existing houses. We know how much we pull out of the ground. If assuming we have that data, right? Like, it seems to me that there could be some amount of math done roughly to get to some reasonableness before we have to get to consultants and things like that.
Yeah, and
you know,
and,
I'm going.
you know, and I hear you. And the consultants, to be clear, are really looking at ultimate build out. That's really primarily what their purpose would be, is to look at that ultimate build out and what that capacity looks like at that point and how we develop toward that. But to go back to answer your first question, yes, I would think that data should exist. It makes sense that it would exist. I think that that's something that the town manager, in my discussions with him, was looking to present that type of information to the council to provide some basis for the numbers that we do have, that we feel fairly comfortable with. But I would have to defer to the Public Works to tell us whether or not that information is readily available, how much effort would be to collect that at staff level.
Okay.
I just don't know.
And one of the reasons why I asked that question is in looking at, other municipalities in the state of Maryland. Like, an example is Rockville, right? So they have an APFO and they have a standards document. You can kind of look at it, and they look at one of their performance service measures, right? And there's a range of them. They kind of talk about one that we haven't talked about much here, which is like fire hydrant pressure, right? That was a concern for them. I don't know that that's a concern for us, but they also had some throughput numbers, I think, in there as well. But when I look at those, I don't see a level of complexity that is terribly frightening. And so I'm just asking, like, is there how much self-help can we do to kind of move things along? Is that a fair question?
No, I think it's a fair question. I think that question is directed to the town manager.
Okay.
More than me. I would tell you that staff, of course, is always going to try to do as much as it can.
Okay.
Based on its resources and what's available before reaching out to a consultant, because we all want to be good fiduciaries of the town's monies. So we would do what we could. But in terms of what the town manager believes is appropriate, and trying to manage our other daily activities, becomes the balance that the town manager has to decide how much allocation he wants to put.
Okay. And I want to say too, I recognize that what I just said does not really acknowledge the full complexity of the equation that needs to be built. There's transmission loss that's quite significant. There's transmission inputs that shouldn't be there, right? The I&I problems that are there that also introduce additional throughput to, like, the sewer system. So I do recognize that it is not just, this isn't a fully in-house thing. I guess what I was just looking for is really so some of it is just public awareness of it, just how complex it is, and what parts of it we could do to maybe help be prepped for when we do bring a contractor in, potentially to do something like this.
One of the first thing that comes to mind is, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, is doing a discovery of what's on our computer system. it is, at least for my department, it's overwhelming.
Okay.
The amount of information that's there. Is it useful information for this exercise? I don't know. I'll be honest with you, I have not had the time to be able to explore it, to really understand what's really there. As far as the other departments go, I don't know what their, what's on their particular drive or what information that they have, but there's definitely going to have to be a big discovery of what's on our system right now to know what can be used, and what information we don't have that we're going to have to create or collect.
Yeah. And I think what we're trying to get to here is on the planning commission, we're concerned with the water allocations, as there's context of water usage, that is a piece of the context, but water allocations, and in the staff report, when we talk about we're out of water allocations, that we are not out of water literally, we are out of water allocations, which are promises for future draws on the existing permit.
Yes.
Right. And so that's where in that math we are at the end of that line.
Yes.
And that's where we have to either find new sources and probably a combination of also is better understanding our own usage and transmission losses and things like that. Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with any of that.
Okay.
The only thing I can add is that, when you look at in the comp plan, the estimated water usage based on our allocations that we have, 2025, at least at the mid-range, between high and low, we're basically there right now, in 2025. And if we do nothing, it'll continue to get worse if we were to continue to allocate water that we don't have, in theory.
Right.
And so it's just restating the obvious fact that it's something we clearly need to work on, to address. And again, it's not a particularly, this is not a particularly ideal situation, but I think the town, should look at, how many applications do we want to vest with an approval before we have water allocation for them? Because like I said earlier, we are getting deeper and deeper into water allocations. And there's going to be a few things that are going to happen. Is that from an administrative standpoint, if we continue to approve projects that we don't have allocations for yet, when we do have these allocations, we're going to have to develop some methodology in terms of, who's going to get the water allocations first. Now, my suggestion would be is that the applicant who is furthest along or is the oldest would get those water allocations by order of when their project is basically ready to record or building permits being issued.
Mm-hmm.
But we are going to get rushed with applications for final plats, for moving along preliminary plats that haven't proceeded because people are waiting to be able to move forward, knowing that there's water allocations for their project. And so we're going to have an administrative crush that's going to be coming to, particularly it's going to be coming to my department 100%, but other departments as well. And so we need to be able to think about, making sure that we have appropriate allocations to try to cover what we've already approved. I don't want to speculate on issues that may occur if we can't provide allocations to everybody after we hopefully get something to be able to help move the backlog of development that's on hold right now. Does that understand?
I do. And I'm wondering if in an APFO or some other policy or ordinance, do we address the potential issues of previously, previously granted water allocations that might be, I don't know how old our oldest ones are at this point, but if somebody's had one for 10, 15 years, but somebody else also has one, but they're shovel ready and ready to go, do they have to wait in line behind people to let them go first, or how does that work?
Especially if they use less water.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
we-
and those are, and that's another whole series of complex, potentially complex questions. Is a matter of fairness and, you know, being pragmatic about what we, you know, what's appropriate for allocation. I would say that really it's going to, the town council, it's going to have to drive ultimately what that policy is going to be. with
So
staff-
what is
staff's
the-
recommendations?
Is there a policy today that governs that?
No.
There, okay, so it's
No.
really a first in, first out.
The only policy that we have, those two policies that I'm aware of that we have right now, broad ones, is one is that we're granting water allocations for projects that already have recorded plats. And that we are continuing, as you know, to process applications for new development up to the point where building permits are issued or a recorded plat is pending.
So are we getting any backlash from developers?
Well, one thing I think you will see, and one's actually coming up at the next planning commission meeting,
Mhm.
August 6th, is I expect we'll probably getting time extensions
Okay,
for preliminary plats, and there'll probably be a bit of a rush as time goes on to, in other words, you're going to be seeing more time extensions for projects until water allocation is resolved.
okay.
But I'm still getting people that are calling me up from time to time going, my project's been has been
Mm-hmm.
on hold on their end. They haven't moved forward their project, and for whatever reason, they're ready to move forward now again. So there's no lack of work coming my way. It's definitely out there, and the water is just is an impediment right now for seeing more growth and development occur faster.
So I understand the benefits of an APFO. Part of it is confidence, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the county requires an APFO right now for considering a prioritization of allocation. But once we could, I don't want to get to a point where 18 months, 2 years down the road, however long it takes, hopefully not that long. That just gets to the point where they consider. That doesn't mean that they're going to approve or allocate. So we would need a COA 3 outside. So I'm just curious, we'd have to do the internal measures like I guess the state recommends.
Well,
Or do we think that we got the APFO, it's adequate, we are articulating the criticality of the situation, we have the data, and then, do we feel like, okay, at that point, there's going to be, we think 80% they're going to say yes, or are we at a 20%?
I have no idea because I'm not involved in those discussions
okay.
whatsoever. That's really the town manager who's engrossed in those discussions.
So I want to go back to something Commissioner Miller said, and I agree with that water and sewer is an important piece of the APFO, should be number one. I think roads also should be number two, but I think fire, EMS, and police, and I go back to what Commissioner Miller said, I think we're going to do an APFO, we do an APFO. And some of it may not be as detailed as we want it to be. I don't know if that's a plus or a minus. It could probably go either way. But I think doing an APFO, let's get as many level of standards in there we can get in there as possible. Recognizing that it's a dynamic document and we can update it. My other question is this, and correct me if I'm wrong, isn't the comprehensive plan due to be revised next year?
No, in 2030.
Oh,
We
I'm
would start that process.
5 years.
I would start that process by January of 2028. I'm
2028.
allowing 2 years for that document to be fully vetted and rewritten.
Okay, so then that makes my other question moot.
That's the thing that's a little awkward right now because this issue was about 2 years later, it would align very well with with our comp plan update.
Right.
But here we are and we need to address it now.
Right.
So then I'll go back and start over again. Where do we go from here? What's next? What's the next step?
Well, the next step is what I think we all know is we need to get,
Do a data dump?
for my part,
Do a data dump?
well, that's part of it. We need to get our arms around what our existing capacity is, and what the future needs are. Looking at doing discovery of what information we have. I do think we need to have a consultant help with this sooner than later, because it becomes a very complex project, we're going to need resources and to help lift this. But we need to get it done sooner than later. I think that's on everybody's mind. So at this point, I think we need to understand where we're going with this, and then specifically get council direction in terms of how they want to proceed with the APFO. Do we just want to address water and sewer? Or do we want to address roads or transportation or other things? There might be, long-term, there might be some value in trying to do address other capacity issues at the same time, because because the research is already being done in some ways, then start and stop. But for our immediate needs, and this becomes a council direct decision, do we want to just solve the immediate issue with water and then follow it up with transportation and other capacity issues? This is really, you pull the string on one thing and it unleashes something else. Water, sewer capacity, transportation, they're all related to development. And so we're a victim of our own success right now, for for what's happening in the Plata. But I think we need to get council direction on how they want to proceed with the APFO, and then start this, looking for information that we have, getting a consultant on board and moving forward with this.
So here's my thought on that. My recommendation for your recommendation would be, right, that if staff was to make a recommendation to the town council, it would be something along these lines. I would take a pragmatic approach in that if we try and do the whole thing all at once, from previous conversations with you, I know you're going to come back to me and say, well, that's 4 different contracts and I need this, and it's going to be, umpteen $1 million, right? It's, when you add them all up, and it's probably going to exceed trying to do all at once what we can afford because of the staff resources we have and how much outside help we would need. So my recommendation to you would be to prioritize the water and sewer infrastructure. And then I have now seen, you and I, when we first met each other, were both new in these roles, but I've now been through enough with you over the past few months where these work plans that you lay out, right, where you kind of lay it out. And what I could envision is, like, when we talk about traffic, and we are about a year and a half out, maybe, from starting our comprehensive plan. And when you previously talked to us about how we would start to line up and have to think about the cost of, like, a traffic plan, a comprehensive traffic plan, and the kinds of things we would need there. What we would need that for the comprehensive plan, I believe, is very much in alignment with what we would need to also do a traffic APFO section.
100%.
Right. So I could see you sitting down and making recommendations where you said, these are the things that you should do early because of priorities, water and sewer. If there's anything else you can pair with that, great, that makes sense. But then lay out these things where it provides us the maximum benefit for taxpayers to both do the comprehensive plan and build in APFOs. In the meantime, I think part of that recommendation would be to us, if there are policies or other ordinances that could be adjusted or standards that could be inserted into existing code for traffic studies or things like that that may trigger that we could do that are short of an APFO, that may be ways we could mitigate some of the impacts and help us better manage infrastructure and capacity needs in roads and other things. Then let us know what that is in that kind of recommendation. And that would be a multi-year project, basically, to take La Plata from where we are today, where we have a policy, a comprehensive plan that we can point to. But in my view, we haven't been as effective as maybe we would like to be at managing our growth. But where you can set us on a path with that recommendation where the council can start to vote on actions to fund the things we would need to go through a multi-year step to get where we're going.
Administrative CIP.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's a really good way to put it. Yeah. Okay.
I would just add, I'm not a big fan of piecemealing, just for expediency. I think in the short term, it probably is helpful, but in the long term, you got to go right back and add these other levels of standards. When you talk about roads, you're talking about fire and EMS, the response time. So why not just roll it all up in there? That's just my 2 cents.
I would modify that. My view is not because of expediency, because of what I perceive as being the real financial constraints that we would have on doing it. I would love to do this the expedient way, which is knock it all out at once. I just think the reality is that we will be very challenged to find that. But part of your recommendation, if you showed what you thought those estimates were in the out years, to your point, the council could look at that, and if the financial reality was they could afford to speed it up, I'm sure the desire is there to do it. I'm just not sure the money is there to do it that fast.
Probably the approach that I would take in that kind of a scenario is to write an RFP and ask for the moon and the stars, everything that we need, and then back into it with whatever bids that we get, and decide what can we afford for this year, what we can afford next year, get the consultants' input in terms of, as I'm assuming that somebody has done this before, right, and understands sort of the what works, what doesn't work. But I think we can sort of mold, once we know what the big number is, to do it all, and rather it makes more sense to try to do it all at once or to do it over a period of time to try to save money. Then we can mold and shape it based on our budget and get it done. If it's maybe a little bit faster, if we were to try to be aggressive over the course of a year or two, maybe it might take a little bit longer, but it just depends on what these costs are ultimately going to be.
Sure. That makes sense. I like that.
So just to clarify, the next steps is a recommendation from Director Dooley to the town council.
Well, what's going to happen now is in August, late August, early September, the town manager has asked myself and the public works director, the water and sewer manager, to make a presentation to council on what our existing situation is with regard to water capacity. I know he's asked me to try to generate some numbers of what I think the amount of new construction and new development is going to be for subdivisions versus non-residential development, and try to get our arms around what does this wave look like that's coming our direction, and then using the public works staff to identify to your point earlier, what is our capacity right now? What are we running at? What's daily, monthly averages? How much can we support? How much would it cost potentially to expand our existing systems that are out there, particularly for sewer, right?
Right.
And what it might look like. for, allocations and this, in terms of what we would need to be able to get to where we have to be right now just to backfill what we've already approved, not even counting
Right,
what's ahead of us potentially based on our comp plan.
right. Okay. And that makes sense in also the, and I think what you were trying to get at too is the timeline of like what the next step is and,
Exactly.
the, so I understand the sequencing, right? We know that town staff is already working towards those initial kind of feedback goals
Yes.
to the town council. But also, I think what you're suggesting also works because in September, the council is having a priorities retreat, right? And so this needs to be prioritized there and then whatever other priorities are there, this will all get discussed with that. And then it all kind of is coming together, I think, nicely over the next, month or two, as things progress, naturally with those other issues.
Yes.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
It sounds like the request kind of for the work plan, the action plan that you mentioned a couple of good points about pairing some multiple policy requirements together in a phased approach to save money. When could when would we think that would need to get approved by, I guess, what month? That wouldn't be part of the August presentation, right? Or
Well,
could it?
the town manager is, if you will, managing that
Okay.
bit, right? That's going to the town council for presentation. So I'm going to rely on him to provide, that direction to the council and his recommendations. But I think what he's looking for as I am is what does the council want to do? They need to give us some marching orders so that we're all in lockstep in terms of where we're going based on the information that we're able to provide to the council, so that you can make as most informed decision as possible based on what we know. The challenge is, again, for us is that unfortunately, most of your directors are new, and having that institutional knowledge here would really be helpful, but we just don't have it. And some of it, we may have to try to sort out ourselves in terms of what information we can put together, and or to discover what we might have already laying on our computer somewhere.
Okay.
And so it's an approach. It's going to be a multi-pronged approach to get as much information as we can to initiate solving this problem. I think we're doing a good job right now in just being aware of it, having these discussions, and providing the council and planning commission with information so that and the community, so there's an awareness and perhaps a little bit of empathy in terms of where we're at and what we're trying to do. We're definitely not ignoring the problem. The water and the sewer issues are really important issues that have to be solved. We also have to balance that with stretching staff even thinner. We're already very shallow on staffing, but also trying to move things forward as best we can, with the expectation of getting help from consultants to be able to help us achieve those goals.
Yeah. Okay.
Kind of mentioned, like in the staff report, that APFO is just one tool that you put in your toolbox, and there's a menu of things out there available that could help us. Are we just trying to scope in my own head? Is it the APFO? I mean, you mentioned the facilities action plan and the capital improvement project master plan. So I'm just curious if is that something that we would need to figure out? It's almost like we need a study to figure out how to do study.
Yeah, I think those
A lot there.
those all become derivatives from a larger study to know what our needs are.
Okay.
And then we can start backing into, okay, well, I know that if I'm Public Works, I know where our the development pressures are. I can prioritize where our capacity is going to come from, how much sewer, how much water, how much infrastructure that we need to get to support that development. Similarly, we have to look at what our existing infrastructure is, what needs to be repaired to keep it operating. Unfortunately, infrastructure is not really the sexiest thing to talk about or to deal with, but it's an important thing, because if you don't manage your existing infrastructure that's been in the ground, it's going to fail on you, and you're going to have real problems, because these people are relying on that infrastructure to work, as opposed to development that hasn't occurred yet. But I think we can, with getting a more robust study, we can start with consultants' help, start to prioritize what we need to do, when we're going to do it, or how we're going to perhaps modify our ordinances to get there, short-term, long run, for our build-out capacity based on what's going on in the town right now and moving forward. It's a complicated thing, and there's going to be a lot of decision points here that are going to be important, that we have to make in terms of, like we talked about, not only getting the information that we need through research, but determining, standards. What is our standards going to be? How are we going to create objective standards that are always going to be, you get the same result for when you plug in the numbers. Not only standards, but what's going to be acceptable to the town, in terms of things like response calls for the police or fire, for getting through an intersection that's impacted. Do you want to sit through 6 light cycles? Is that good enough? Or do we want something no more than maybe 2 or 3? Because there's going to be, we have streets like that, intersections like that, that are terribly complicated. They just break down. I was a victim of that on just before 4th of July. I was on Charles Street in the late afternoon coming back from lunch, and I sat through at least 5 or 6 cycles before I was able to make a left turn on Charles Street. That may not be the capacity that we want. You might want to try to do other things, to try to lessen that impact on our intersections through transportation engineering modifications, or that are out there that go beyond my scope or knowledge of what's possible. But we've at least identified what the issues are. We can fix the problems by having people or consultants that have that expertise to help us.
Okay, thank you. That definitely helps kind of scope of what this study would do. Okay.
Any additional comments, questions? Any closing remarks from you, Director
I
Dewey?
appreciate the feedback, and I will report back our discussion to the town manager, and look forward to their council presentation.
I would like to just say thank you to you, sir. I know you've worked a lot of long hours on pulling all this information together. I appreciated being able to have this discussion in this format. I don't believe we would have been able to sit and kind of go through in as much detail. We wouldn't have had this kind of time with you to explore the depths of some of these things on the council, right? And so I think this was a good place to do it. I learned a lot through this, just preparing for it and just having this conversation. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Most welcome.
Yeah.
Given there are no more questions or comments, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.